All right, now let's leave leptin behind and go to another one, namely adiponectin. You might not have ever heard of adiponectin, but it is a very relevant hormone, and indeed so relevant that there are drugs that are attempting to mimic its effects. One direct effect is that adiponectin enhances insulin sensitivity throughout the body. So if you have an insulin-resistant tissue, adiponectin starts to reverse that. Similarly, and even related to that, it has an anti-inflammatory effect. So if there is a tissue or a cell whose immunity has been turned on, adiponectin helps turn it down. Also, adiponectin has been shown to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease by directly acting to reverse atherosclerosis. So here we have not only the overt metabolic benefits, but even an overt cardiovascular benefit. Now, unlike leptin, as a fat cell is undergoing hypertrophy, it begins to produce less adiponectin. So more fat usually means less adiponectin, or I should say larger fat cells means less adiponectin. Now, with these two hormones in mind, one of the tools that my lab and other labs have used in order to have a surrogate marker of fat cell size is the adiponectin to leptin ratio. Now, to remember the relevance of the fat cell, you need to go back and listen to earlier metabolic classrooms where even within just the last 2, we've talked about it, but certainly within the last 10 or so, we've mentioned it a few times. But the larger the fat cell gets, the more problematic it becomes. It's not really a matter of how much fat mass a person has, but rather the size of the fat cells. So the larger the fat cell, the more leptin and the less adiponectin. Thus, if the adiponectin to leptin ratio is going down over time, adiponectin to leptin ratio going down, that suggests that the adipocytes are undergoing hypertrophy. If someone were to measure this and they found that their adiponectin to leptin ratio were going up, it would suggest that the fat cells were shrinking, which is, of course, going to be an overall favorable metabolic change. Now, let's get on to the next one, estrogens. And this is, of course, the process of aromatization of the androgens within the adipose tissue. Estrogens do have metabolic effects. They promote insulin sensitivity. They promote fat burning. It generally promotes greater subcutaneous fat, which is a healthier place to store fat. It promotes bone strength by improving the recycling or the turnover of the bone, pulling away old bone and helping lay down new, stronger bone. And of course, it's essential for reproductive health in females, but even relevant in males as well. Now, as I noted earlier, the fat cells in this aromatization becomes absolutely essential in the postmenopausal woman, but it's also relevant even premenopausal. But in the premenopausal woman, her relatively higher levels of estrogens mean that the woman generally will have smaller but more abundant cells. And so the aromatization is relatively modest because it is as a cell undergoes hypertrophy that its aromatization capacity starts to increase. Now, this becomes very relevant in men because in men who start to gain more weight, they generally will gain more weight through hypertrophy. And so in the man, he can start to have substantial estrogen production from his fat tissue. It's as if his larger fat cells are behaving like ovaries and aromatizing the androgens, converting them into estrogens. This is why some men, as they gain fat, may start to store fat in more prototypical female areas, including breasts. Now, this is not to say that he is able to nurse a baby. No, that is a much more complicated process. But he's storing fat in a way that looks like he's developing breasts. That's a condition called gynecomastia. So it looks like he's developing breast, and he's not developing breast tissue. He's just storing his fat in that area, making it look like he is.